All right, buckle up, everybody, because today we are diving deep into Brahmacharya
Oh, yeah.
and well, honestly, kind of crazy history of the Gaudiya Vaishnava movement.
It's a wild ride.
We're going to be looking at, ancient texts. We're going
hmm
to be looking at power struggles. We've even got a modern group that's causing some, controversy.
Yeah, raising some eyebrows.
So this deep dive is about way more than just some old dusty practices. We're going to see how these ideals, how they played out in the real world.
Yeah.
Like how they still matter today, even if we aren't, wandering around chanting in Sanskrit.
Exactly. We've got such a cool mix of sources for this deep dive. We've got like ancient texts on Brahmacharya. We've got historical analyses of the Gaudiya tradition, like after its founder, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Right.
And then we've even got a critique of a modern group that's claiming to be part of, the lineage.
Oh, wow.
But the really juicy part is that we'll see how this whole Brahmacharya thing gets like woven into actual power struggles, So interesting.
Competing interpretations and even like the survival of this entire religious lineage.
It's like Game of Thrones, but with Sanskrit chanting.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, so before we get into all the drama,
Okay.
let's just break down Brahmacharya. I mean, I kind of get it, right? It's more than just like, staying celibate.
Right.
But how do the texts actually define it?
Well, they describe Brahmacharya as like a dedicated channeling of energy towards, spiritual goals.
Okay.
So it's about like intense focus
Yeah.
and minimizing anything that distracts you from that,
Right.
which, that's obviously a challenge.
Yeah, that's a huge challenge.
And the texts are pretty upfront about that,
Like they don't sugarcoat it.
No, not at all.
Some of the practices they describe are, they're intense, like limited contact even with your family,
Yeah.
avoiding any kind of like adornment or anything that might attract attention. It's basically like the opposite of every dating advice article ever written.
Uh-huh. That's a good point. Like, don't wear perfume on a first date. Come on.
Right.
But, I mean, even if we think those specific practices are a bit much,
Yeah.
I get the core idea, right?
Yeah.
Like, think about how distracted we are today.
Oh, constantly.
Social media, the news, just that never-ending to-do list. It's all pulling us away from what we actually want to do.
Totally. Brahmacharya, at its core, it's really about like confronting that head on.
It's like a mental decluttering project,
Mm-hmm.
but like on a spiritual level.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to get this idea of Brahmacharya if you want to understand the whole Gaudiya Vaishnava movement.
Okay.
Because it's not just about like a list of rules. It's like a fundamental principle that shapes their whole worldview.
Okay, so let's get into the Gaudiya Vaishnavism scene then.
All right.
Like, what was going on after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu passed away?
Well, it got a little messy, like, to put it mildly.
Oh.
After Mahaprabhu died, there wasn't like one clear successor. There were actually multiple prominent figures who, they all popped up, and each one had their own like dedicated following.
So, like, different factions.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. And that obviously led to, people interpreting the teachings differently.
Right.
And a whole lot of tension within the movement.
Okay, so who were some of the, like, big names? And what were they, fighting about?
All right, so one really influential guy was Adwaita Prabhu.
Okay.
He was known for like really pushing this idea of universal love and acceptance, even for people who were considered, low-born in the caste system.
So it's pretty radical for that time.
Yeah, it was a big deal. But some people criticized him because he focused so much on philosophical texts.
So they felt like he wasn't devotional enough.
Yeah, like they thought he was more of a scholar than a spiritual leader, maybe.
Interesting. So was that like a common view back then? That you couldn't be both?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
It's important to remember that, back then, scholarship and spiritual leadership weren't necessarily seen as like opposite things.
Right.
But Adwaita's approach definitely leaned heavily on intellectual understanding. Then you have Nityananda Prabhu, who was, the guy was incredibly charismatic.
Okay.
And known for his like ecstatic devotional practices.
Very different from Adwaita Prabhu.
Yeah, totally different vibes. But Nityananda, going back to like this pretty wealthy family life after Mahaprabhu's death.
Okay.
And then there was some, some questions about his caste status too. Those things caused some controversy.
So it sounds like you had like some major personality clashes going on.
Oh, yeah.
Along with these disagreements about like how to practice what the teachings actually meant.
Absolutely. And what made this even more, I guess, explosive is that the early Gaudiya Vaishnava texts, they didn't really go deep into like philosophical
Who
explanations.
else
No,
not?
they were all about like piety and devotional zeal, which, I mean, that was powerful, don't get me wrong. But some people wondered if that was enough to keep the movement going, you know?
It's like they had all this passion, all
Yes.
this energy,
Uh-huh.
but no structure to contain it.
You nailed it. And that's where the Katuri festival comes in. This was like a turning point,
Oh.
a real attempt to bring some order to all this chaos.
So was this Katori Festival like a big conference or gathering?
Exactly. It was massive.
Mm.
Gaudiya Vaishnavas came from all over,
Wow.
and it was organized largely by this incredible woman, Jana Vamata.
A woman. Wow. That's, I mean, leading the charge to unify this whole movement.
I know, right?
That's pretty impressive, especially for back then.
It is. Jana Vamata was essential as a mediator,
Go.
trying to like bridge the gaps between all these different groups.
She was like the peacemaker.
Totally. And, you know, a lot of people recognized that if this movement was going to survive,
Yeah,
they needed a more unified, structured approach.
that makes sense. So what happened? Like, what were the big decisions that came out of this Katori gathering? Did they manage to smooth things over?
Well, it was complicated, but they made some good progress. First, they formally accepted what's called the Vrindavan dogma.
The Vrindavan what?
Dogma, and the writings of the Goswamis as like the central texts for Gaudiya Vaishnavas.
Okay, for those of us who don't speak fluent Gaudiya Vaishnavism,
Uh-huh.
could
Yeah.
you break that down?
Sure. So Vrindavan, that's a sacred town in India,
Okay,
and it's like super important to the life and teachings of Krishna,
got it.
who is like a major deity in Gaudiya Vaishnavism. So this Vrindavan dogma,
Right.
that refers to a specific set of beliefs and philosophies that came out of the community of devotees who lived in Vrindavan.
Okay.
Like after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Goswamis were these 6 super respected scholar saints.
Wow.
They lived in Vrindavan. And their writings were basically like the foundation for Gaudiya Vaishnava theology.
So by like officially saying, these are our texts, these are our teachings, they're
Yeah.
trying to get everyone on the same page.
Exactly. Creating a shared foundation, right, for all Gaudiya Vaishnavas to follow.
Makes sense. I mean, having everyone agree on which books are the official ones
Uh-huh.
probably cuts down on a lot of arguments.
For sure. But here's the thing. Even with everyone using the same texts,
Yeah.
you're still going to have disagreements.
Oh, totally. People love to argue about interpretation.
Haha, exactly. So, the Katuri Festival, they addressed that in a clever way.
Oh, how'd they do that?
They formalized the concept of the Panchatattva.
The Panchatattva. Okay, you got to tell me more about this.
So the Panchatattva, it's a group of 5 deities.
Okay,
They represent different aspects of God in Gaudiya Vaishnavism.
got it.
But here's the cool part. They specifically structured this concept to include figures who'd been at the center of, you know, all that drama.
Oh, so they're bringing in the troublemaker.
Basically. By making them all part of one unified divine framework, they basically diffuse some of the tension between their followers.
So instead of arguing about whose guru was the best,
Mm-hmm.
they created a system where everyone, like, had a place at the table.
Exactly. Everyone's part of the divine hierarchy.
That's smart. And it kind of leads into the third big decision that came out of the Katuri Festival, right?
You got it.
Yeah.
They really emphasized lineage
Mm.
and connection through all of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's associates.
Not just picking favorites.
Right. Not just a select few.
They were trying to create, like, a sense of family for the whole movement.
Yeah, like we're all in this together no matter what branch we come from.
I like that. Creating unity without erasing the differences.
Mm-hmm.
That's something we're still trying to figure out today, you know?
Yeah, big
And all sorts of groups and organizations.
sure.
But I have a feeling this whole unity thing
Yeah.
doesn't exactly have a fairy tale ending, does it?
You're right about that. I mean, the Katuri Festival, it was a great start, but the seeds of future conflict, they were already planted.
Right.
And, you know, as we'll see in the next part of our deep dive, those seeds, well, they eventually sprouted into some pretty dramatic events.
All right, welcome back to our deep dive.
Mm-hmm.
Last time we were talking about the Gaudiya Vaishnava movement, you know, after their founder passed away.
Right.
And the Katuri Festival felt like, I don't know, like a step toward getting their act together.
Yeah.
But you were saying the trouble was coming.
It was.
So what happened next?
Well, the Kateri Festival definitely laid down some like important groundwork,
Hmm.
but anytime you try to like unify a bunch of different people, there's going to be challenges.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
So fast forward a few decades, and we get to the death of Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur,
Okay.
who was a really major figure in the movement.
Got it.
Like this guy, he was a prolific scholar,
Wow.
dynamic preacher, and he really pushed to like spread Gaudiya Vaishnavism beyond its traditional border.
Okay, so this Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur,
Yeah.
he sounds like a pretty important guy.
Oh, hugely important.
So what happened after he died? Did the movement just like keep growing?
It did keep spreading, but not without like some serious internal problems.
Uh-oh.
See, Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur, he wanted to make sure that the leadership transition went smoothly
Okay,
and that people wouldn't fight over who was in charge.
makes sense.
So he told his disciples to form a governing body.
That's smart. So like a council or something.
Yeah, exactly. He thought that would like stop any one person from claiming all the authority
Right.
and keep the focus on the teachings, not personalities.
That sounds like a pretty good plan.
Yeah.
So did it work?
Sadly, no. Even the best plans can go wrong when, egos and different interpretations get involved.
Yeah, that's human nature for you.
It really is. And in this case, his instructions actually caused even more conflict.
No way. So wait, what happened? Did the disciples just ignore what he said and start fighting?
Not really.
Yeah.
They did try to make a governing body, but the problem was more about like who had the power within that body
I see.
and how decisions were made.
Right.
There were two main guys at the center of all this. Kunja Bihari Vidyabhusana and Ananta Vasudeva.
All right. So tell me about these two. What was their deal?
Well, Kunja Bihari Vidyabhusana, he said that Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur had personally chosen him as his successor.
So like he was the heir apparent.
Yeah, something like that. And he argued that this gave him special authority in the movement.
Okay.
But a lot of the other disciples, they didn't agree.
Really?
They questioned whether he was actually chosen, and they didn't think he had like the right qualities to be a leader.
So he had the ambition, but maybe not the respect?
Yeah, maybe not the respect of the community. And then you had Ananta Vasudeva.
Okay.
He was a brilliant scholar and a really good speaker.
Okay.
He was super respected in the Gaudiya math.
So he's got the brains and the charisma.
Yeah.
What was his problem with, what was the other guy's name?
Kunja Bihari Vidyabhusana.
Kunja Bihari Vidyabhusana, right? Was it just a personality clash or was it something deeper?
It was deeper than personalities. At first, Ananta Vasudeva, he supported the idea of a governing body.
Okay.
But he had issues with Kunja Bihari Vidyabhusana's claim to be the leader.
Yeah.
But then something even crazier happened.
What?
Ananta Vasudeva started questioning Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur himself.
Whoa. Hold on. He's questioning his own guru now.
Yeah.
Why? Like, did he find something in the teachings that he disagreed with?
It wasn't really about specific teachings. It was more like a fundamental shift in how he understood lineage
I see.
and spiritual authority. He came to believe that, putting so much emphasis on institutional lineage, like Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur did, he thought that was actually like a distortion of true Gaudiya Vaishnavism.
So what, he thought it was too focused on the organization?
Yeah.
Not enough on, like, the inner stuff?
Exactly. He felt that real spiritual authority came from direct realization and personal experience, not from holding a position.
That's a pretty radical stance to take, considering he was, like, right in the middle of the movement.
Right.
So what did he do? Did he try to change things from the inside?
He ended up leaving the Gaudiya math.
Oh.
He started his own lineage.
So we went from trying to be unified to a full-on split.
Yep.
What happened next?
Well, this split, it was a huge deal for the Gaudiya math.
Yeah.
It wasn't just like a peaceful separation.
Okay.
You had accusations being thrown around, legal battles over property,
Oh, wow.
and like a really deep feeling of betrayal on both sides.
This is intense. It sounds like way more than just a philosophical disagreement.
It was. I mean, when you have these big personalities who are really invested in their beliefs, and there's power and authority involved,
You have to admit.
things can get ugly. There were accusations about, personal misconducts, teachings being misinterpreted, and both sides tried to discredit each other's lineage.
Like a spiritual family feud.
Exactly. And the worst part is, This split, it affected the whole Gaudiya Vaishnava community.
Yeah, I can
It
imagine.
created so much confusion,
Hmm.
uncertainty. People didn't know who to follow.
Or which lineage was like the real deal.
Yeah, exactly.
So all that work they did at the Katuri Festival to try and unify everyone,
I know.
it basically unraveled.
Yeah, pretty much. It's kind of sad when you think about it.
It is.
It's a good reminder that even if people have the best intentions,
Mm-hmm.
we're human, we make mistakes.
Likely.
And power dynamics can really mess things up,
Yeah.
especially in big, diverse spiritual movements.
So even with all this emphasis on unity and lineage,
Mm-hmm.
they still ended up divided.
They did. And what's even more disheartening is that, we're still dealing with the effects of this split today.
Really?
Yeah, there are still multiple branches of the Gaudiya math,
Okay.
each one with their own lineage
Right.
and their own way of understanding Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati Thakur's teachings.
So how can a tradition that's all about unity and shared lineage
Right.
deal with these huge internal divisions?
That is the question, and it's one we're going to keep exploring as we go into the next part of our deep dive.
Welcome back, everybody. So we've been on quite a journey through Brahmacharya and the Gaudiya Vaishnava movement.
Yeah, it's been wild.
We've looked at those strict Brahmacharya practices,
Right.
all those power struggles that went down.
Mm.
I mean, it's a lot to process.
It is, but I think what's really interesting is how these seemingly totally different things are actually connected.
Okay.
Like Brahmacharya, right? It's all about focusing your energy.
Right, getting rid of distractions.
Yeah, minimizing distractions. And that's supposed to create a strong foundation for spiritual practice.
Yeah.
But as we saw, that inner focus,
Uh-huh.
it doesn't magically make everything harmonious on the outside.
Yeah, that's for sure. We saw how even when people have good intentions, things get messy when egos and ambitions get mixed in.
Oh, yeah. And especially when you're talking about interpretations of teachings, it's like everyone thinks they're right.
Exactly. And those complexities, they don't just disappear because it's about spiritual stuff.
Nope, not at all.
Sometimes it feels like they even get worse.
Yeah, it's because the stakes are so high.
Yeah.
I mean, people are dealing with huge questions about life,
Mm-hmm.
reality.
Their connection to the divine.
Exactly. So it's understandable that things can get a little heated.
Totally. But it does make me wonder, how can a tradition that values unity and lineage so much
Right.
also be so prone to, splitting apart?
It is a bit of a paradox, but honestly, it's a paradox you see in a lot of spiritual traditions.
Really?
Yeah. I think it shows that tension between, wanting to find your own spiritual understanding,
Yeah.
but also wanting to belong to a community.
It's like that pull between the individual and the group.
Totally. We all want our own path, but we also want to feel connected to something bigger than ourselves.
That makes sense. And finding that balance
Yeah.
between going your own way and being part of the group,
Hmm.
that's something we all struggle with.
It is. It's a lifelong process, both for individuals and for entire spiritual traditions.
Right. It's like that dance between Brahmacharya, that inner focus
Yes.
and the outer reality of dealing with relationships
Yeah.
and power dynamics and just the messiness of being human.
Exactly. And that's a dance we're all trying to learn.
So before we wrap up, can we go back to that Misja Zaitani group?
Sure.
You mentioned they were, doing some questionable things.
Yeah.
Can you tell us more about that?
Of course. It's important to remember that we only have one source on them.
Okay.
So we got to be careful about bias and all that.
Right.
But this source, it raises some serious concerns.
Like what?
It suggests that Mr. Daitani might be manipulating and exploiting their followers and using spiritual authority to do it.
That's heavy stuff. So what are they actually accused of doing?
Well, the source says they demand a lot of unpaid labor from their members,
Okay.
as a requirement to even get initiated.
Wow.
They also isolate them from the wider Gaudiya Vaishnava community.
So controlling what information they have access to.
Exactly. And if anyone questions the teachings or the leader,
Uh-oh.
they get labeled as spiritually weak.
It sounds like they're creating an environment where no one feels safe speaking up.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And it's pretty messed up, considering Gaudiya Vaishnavism is all about love and compassion and service,
It is, and it shows how important it is to be able to tell the difference between real spiritual authority,
Right.
which should empower people,
Mm-hmm.
and just abusing power for personal gain.
So what are some red flags we should watch out for?
Okay, good question. A few things come to mind.
Okay, I'm listening.
First, isolation and control. Do they discourage you from seeing your family and friends outside the group? Do they control what you read and watch? Do they put down anyone who questions things?
Got it. What else?
Financial exploitation. Are they always asking for money?
Yeah.
And are they shady about how they're using it?
Okay.
And lastly, emotional manipulation.
Like what?
Do they use fear or guilt to control you?
Mm-hmm.
Do they make you feel like you need them to be happy?
So basically, if a group makes you feel bad about yourself or tries to cut you off from the outside world,
Yeah.
that's a big red flag.
Huge red flag. Because healthy spiritual communities, they should encourage you to grow and think critically.
Yeah.
Not just blindly obey.
Makes sense. So as we're wrapping up our deep dive,
Yeah.
what are some key takeaways for our listeners, like stuff they can use in their own lives?
I think the most important thing is to stay curious.
Okay.
Ask questions.
Hmm.
And don't be afraid to challenge what you think you know.
Even when it comes to your beliefs or people you trust.
Especially then. Because even the best spiritual ideas, they can get twisted.
The Gaudiya Vaishnava movement, with all its ups and downs, it shows us that pretty clearly.
It does.
It's like we all need our own internal compass
Absolutely.
to know what feels true for us.
And to figure out what's right for us, we got to think critically.
Yeah.
Look at things from different angles.
Be open to new ideas.
Exactly. It takes courage and it takes humility.
Well, that's some great advice. So to everyone listening, stay curious.
Stay curious.
Stay discerning.
Be discerning.
And keep searching for those deeper truths wherever they may lead.
That's the adventure.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, everybody.
See you next time.